Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My wife is in the other room threatening to clean her studio. So the raucous noise that you will hear in the background is her, not me. Before we get started on this, I've got a new book that I want to tell you about and show you about. But before we get to my book, I just want you to give you a little update on the reading situation here at the MILNOR compound. Just finished Travels by Michael Crichton. This is the first Michael Crichton book I've ever read. And this is a nonfiction book about, you might have guessed, travels, but also his departure from the medical world into the world of traveling, making films, writing. I thought it was really good. There's some interesting things in here about sort of psychic phenomenon, mysticism, as well as just straight funny travel writing. That's really good. And this morning I started The World Is My Home, a memoir by James Michener. If you think you're a stud or a studette, forget it, because chances are Michener's already been there, already done it, already written about it, and he probably did it better than you will. And I'm only 50 or 60 pages in, and I just feel like giving up in life. But just remember, at 40 years old, he had a grand total of $800 to his name and hadn't written anything. So, and if you don't know James Michener, now would be the time to look him up. He's written like probably 50 books. Kind of crazy. All right, so I have a new book, this behemoth, this beast of a book right here that I want to tell you about. I don't make many books these days, which might sound crazy because I work for Blurb. I used to make books all the time, but I also used to be in the field making work all the time, and that's pretty rare for me these days. So, and that's consequently why I have this book sitting right here. But let me explain this first. I'm going to talk about why I made this, how I made this, and then how I'm going to use it. So let's back up a little bit. So a couple of months ago, Blurb releases a new product, which is a LayFlat book, but they've made some tweaks and advances in the LayFlat book, including some of the papers. Now, normally, if I wanted to see samples of a book like this, I would be in the Blurb office, and I would just see samples that were laying around. I'd get a gauge of them. I'd be able to share that data with you. But in this case, because we don't have an office right now because of COVID, I thought, you know what, maybe I should make a sample. And I needed a test book. And the only thing that I had at my disposal in terms of work, I had two options. I could go back and use old work, which I do not want to do. I am so sick of my own photography and the same old stories I've been rehashing and repurposing for years. I can't even look at it anymore. That's why when people ask me for prints, I say no, because I really don't even want to look at stuff anymore. The only work I had from the past year was VanLife work. And I'm using that phrase, VanLife, tentatively because that whole community in some ways makes my stomach turn, especially the YouTube VanLifers. Not all of them, but quite a few. But anyway, I was out, I bought a van, I started exploring, and we bought the van before COVID. So we didn't envision COVID coming along, but the van turned out to be a pretty useful tool during the last year because everything I do with the camera, when I do a project, it's people-based documentary work. I don't walk around, shoot random photos. I don't shoot pictures of old buildings. I don't shoot random urban landscapes void of people. I tend to work with people. So that means gaining access, gaining trust, and going back to the same location again and again and again, the same people again and again and again, and building a body of work. Well, there's no way to do that safely during COVID, so I had to scrap it for a year. And what I did in turn was go out and just make content from the van. Now, this was very different for me. I don't shoot landscapes particularly well. I don't like landscape photography. I don't look at it. I don't buy it. I don't think I have any landscape books in my catalog. I might. If they are, I haven't looked at them in years. So anyway, I had this work. This is not a story book. This is what I would call a portfolio book. This is just a random assortment of images that I made while out in the van. That is the only consistent thread that connects these images in the book. So there's not a lot of copy, there's not a lot of story, there's no transitional images linking you from one section of the story to the other. It's just photo, photo, photo. It's kind of boring. But there's a lot of books like this, and the LayFlat works. Basically, it's exactly what it's designed for. So I'll get there. I wanted an 8x10 portrait size book. I get a lot of comments and questions from people that say, well, I shoot landscape format images, so I have to have a landscape format book. That is not true. That is sort of a design cop-out, thinking that it's like saying I shoot Hasselblad, I have to have a square book. You don't, and for the most part, all the Hasselblad books I have that are done by other photographers, they're not square. They're portrait format, meaning they're vertical in shape, if you will, aspect ratio. I wanted 8x10, And this presents a design challenge because I shoot vertical and horizontal images. And with a book like this, typically if I'm making a portfolio, I just may run double truck after double truck. But I also wanted to throw in a little bit of design challenge, and I knew that the 8x10 portrait would give that to me. But in essence, what this book is just big, bold layouts and big, bold typography. That's really kind of all I was after here. This is a test book, and I'm going to put that in all caps, bold, and in some garish font, just because I can. This is a test book. I am not looking for perfection. In fact, I don't have a perfect book in my entire collection of books. I think if you talk to every designer and every photographer, they would find something about the book they did that they would change if they had a chance. I am not looking for perfection. I'm testing and trying. Look at the cover. The cover is weird. A huge percentage of the copy and sort of the design is on the back, not the front. And then I've got these weird lines and things. I'm trying things. That's the point of a test book. If you are not making test books, the odds of you making a great photo book on the first try are zero. I don't know anyone who is capable of doing that, even at the highest levels of publication design and photography. They are constantly looking at proof after proof, trying to tinker and change things. So don't sweat a test book. It's actually a lot of fun, takes a lot of the pressure off. So this is how it came to be. I'm sitting here saying to myself, I gotta make a test book because I don't know what these look like, these new LayFlat things. Again, I'm not working as a photographer anymore. I don't really have a personal need for it, but I have a professional need because when you ask me what these are about, I can then say, oh, this is what I think about the luster paper or the Mohawk Proline papers, which was what I was intentionally and originally going to make, but that changed. So as I'm sitting here contemplating the idea of making this book, I get an email from Blurb Large Order Services and they said, hey, have you ever done any of a sample of the new LayFlats? And I go, no. But I just mocked up a book that I've literally uploaded but haven't purchased yet. I said, do you want that as a sample? And they go, did you make it with luster paper? I said, no, I made it with the Mohawk paper. And they said, can you redo it and re-upload it with luster? And I said, okay. And so they got the sample for me. I said, look, you can print a sample for yourself. If you print a second sample for me, I would love it. That would really help me out. They said, awesome. So now suddenly, instead of having to spend, I think this was a $300 book, and we'll get to that in a minute, why you would spend $300 on a book. And by the way, the Blurb LayFlats, even though this is like a $300 book, it's cheaper than vast majority of other LayFlat options I've seen from other companies. And I was like, okay, cool. I don't have to pay $300, which I would have gladly because I try to pay for all of my books so that the jaded folks out there don't say, oh, the only reason you make books is because you work for Blurb and you get them for free. I've been hearing that for almost 11 years now, which is why I buy 99.9% of all my books, even if I could get them for free. I buy them so that I can just say to those people, go away, I buy my own books. But in this case, the timing was impeccable. I'm just getting ready to hit buy. Large Order Services reach out and says, do you have a sample? I go, I did, and it's a LayFlat book about van life, so there's nothing, it's kind of middle of the road. It's not some funky offbeat documentary project. I think it would be good for your purposes. So they print a copy for themselves. I get a copy. And then like 2 days later, marketing department reaches out and says, hey, can you make a film for us? A short film about X, Y, and Z, and we need you to film a sample at the end. Do you have any new sample books? And I'm like, funny you should ask. So the timing was great. I needed it, Large Order needed it, and marketing needed it, so it worked out. Here's where it gets funky. So shipping. Now, a lot of you know that I'm working on a side project called AG23. The first issue is sold out. The second issue we are proofing. The digital proof came last week. There was something that wasn't quite right, so we're tweaking it right now. And then I should get the next version of that today. And if that looks okay, then we'll print the first printed proof. And then when I get the printed proof, if that looks okay, then we'll do the actual print run. That's all happening hopefully this week. I get a lot of questions about why we're not shipping AG to other countries. Well, let me just say a couple of things. I just got a magazine from Europe that someone sent me from Europe that was mailed in early November. I just got it. It took 5 months to get here. My mail going from New Mexico to Texas is averaging 5 weeks, and my brother is telling me that all of the things that I'm sending have been opened. This is happening across the board, whether it doesn't matter what distribution method, it is the shipping industry right now, due to COVID, is in complete and utter turmoil. I have an edition of one art book that has been worked on by 11 different artists, and I am afraid to mail it. So I realized there's an artist that I want to work on this book. I cannot ship it to her. I have to only deliver this book by hand until the shipping situation gets sorted out. And the last thing I'll say about shipping is with this baby. So they print a copy and send it to me. I get a delivery notice. This is on like a Friday. I get a delivery notice and I go out to the compound here at the MILNOR Institute of Lower Learning in the Artificial Appendix, and I go out to the gate and I don't see a package. So I check in the bushes, there's no package. I check with all the neighbors, there's no package. I check with the shipper, yes, we delivered it, it's there. So a day goes by, 2 days goes by, 3 days goes by. I basically, I know this thing is AWOL, it's lost or stolen. My guess was somebody stole it. They opened up the box, saw it was a book, probably threw it in the bushes. So I walk like a half a mile in all 4 directions from my house on all the roads, looking in the bushes. There's nothing. 4 days goes by, and I come home late at night from a wildebeest hunt, and sitting on a table in front of my house is the box with the book unopened. I check with the neighbors. None of them put it here. There's no way for a delivery service to get inside the gate. So I'm like baffled as to how this happened. But the good news is it showed up. My point is shipping is a nightmare right now. So I don't know if the second issue of AG23 is going to be made internationally, because I don't have any idea what that would mean and what it would cost right now. So I'm sorry, you have to be patient. We want to get it to you. But most importantly, and I know we're a little sidetracked from this LayFlat book, remember with AG23, the zine itself, the physical copy of the zine, is a catalyst to get you to the AG23 website, and then most importantly, to get you from the AG23 website to the contributors themselves, away from us, away from AG23, away from me, to the contributors. But I have a whole new film coming about this where I'll go much more into agonizing detail. So that is how this book came to be. I needed a sample. I mocked up a VanLife book. I was just about to buy it. Blurb large order, asked for a copy. Whoa, saved me from paying the fee. And then marketing came and said, hey, can you make a film? We need you to have a new sample book. Boom, I have a sample book, etc. So let me show you, now that I told you the long and rambling story of how it came to be, let me tell you how I made it. And then I'm going to come back and tell you how I would use this book if I was still working as a snapper. Hello everyone, and I want to show you how I made this book. Now I just had to go in the other room and ask my wife to keep it down. I think she had Whitney Houston on and she was singing. And it would have been kind of nice as a background soundtrack, but I don't know. I had to go in and intervene. So what I did here, folks, is I went to my trusty Blurb Bookwrite software, and I just hit that and I opened it. What you are looking at is inside of the Blurb Bookwrite software. This is not a tutorial. This is how I put this book together, and there are a couple of things that I want to show you that I think might be helpful. Now, if you haven't used Blurb Bookwrite software, just know that it, like any other software, just requires a little bit of test drive before you get the hang of it. If you can use Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, Adobe InDesign, or even Microsoft Excel, my least favorite application on the or program on the planet, you can easily use Bookwrite. It just takes a couple of test drives of getting in here. But I want to show you a couple of buttons that I think are very helpful. Up here in the upper left, I have my covers and I have my pages tab. And as you can see, when I hit pages, you'll see all the spreads that I've laid out, and in a nice orderly fashion here. And I'll go back to the cover. Now, what I mentioned earlier about test books, I make a ton of test books. And when I make a test book, I am experimenting constantly. This cover is an experimentation. There are things about this cover I like, and I'm going to hit preview up here in the upper right just to clean up the spread so we can see it a little clearer. And oh, by the way, I have a little dragger here if I want to zoom in. There are aspects of this cover I love, and there are aspects I absolutely are mortified by. This photo of the bird here jammed in on the right is just ridiculous. That is just awful. And the transition between the two, even though I like how the tail of the bird bleeds into the black, that I like, but it's too rough. It's too crude. It needs something in there. I was pressed for time. Bear with me. I like this type treatment with the Roman numerals, and I was experimenting with the line tools a lot in this document, so I do like that. And I like the oversized copy that's dramatic and also that's bleeding off of the edge of the page. I like how the G drops off, and I like how the quotes at the top are dropping off. So there are aspects of it I like, and then this is just horrifying to me. But again, I make mistakes all the time. Pages doc. As you can see, I've got my spreads laid out here. I've got a nice little shape tool with that same repeating moon that's on the cover of the book. I've dropped it in here. This looks like some weird sort of cult thing, but it's not. It's just a triangle. And this is a spread that shouldn't belong because I've worked on this book a million times. And then we get really into the spreads. And if I go to preview here again, it cleans it up, and I can sort of go through the spreads of the book. Again, I like this, the how sparse this is, and just solid black, solid white. And I also repeated that Roman numeral chapter copy treatment over here on the left, which I like. But mostly it's just spreads. Remember, this is a LayFlat book, so I'm testing why I would use this LayFlat book, and I'm testing things specifically by putting things in the gutter that I would normally not do. If this was a regular bound Blurb book, I would not put the van so close to that gutter because I would lose that part right there. You'd still be able to see it, but you'd have to bend the book quite apart to be able to see that. So with LayFlat, I'm testing, again, putting myself very close to the center. Just some people say this is how I look best, as with a glowing head in darkness. I don't know. It's arguable. Again, just going through the spreads here. ¿Quién es más macho? Dan or Julio Iglesias? Copy. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to the book here. Now, there's a few things I like about this software that you may find hidden or steps that may save you some time. How you import, I just click this button here and it says, where do you want to get your images from? And you select them and hit OK and bring them in. So that's how I do it. I bring my images in just by hitting this button. One of the spreads I use a lot in this, if I go to layouts here, layouts, one of the spreads I use a lot are the spread layouts right here. It's where you just drag and drop this down. You drag whatever you want, or you can double click it, and that's how I used it. But most of this book, as you see, are just giant double trucks because, again, I'm testing LayFlat. So here's where I found that spread. If I go to photos, you'll see these check boxes here. So let's say that I had 80 photographs that I dragged in. I hit this plus button, I dragged them in. And I don't necessarily, once it's in the book, I don't want to see it at the top. So if I don't want to see it at the top, I go down here and I click just show me the unused images. So now every single thing that's in this book is gone from the timeline up here, not the timeline, but the photo area up here. And all I've got left are images that I have yet to use in the book. This just helps clean up the desktop. I know what you're thinking. You're like, MILNOR. Every single one of these is a gem, is a portfolio image that I would pay top dollar for. I would give you anything in my possession for a copy of one of these, and yet they didn't even make the cut. I know. When you're at my level, it's terrifying what doesn't make the cut. Okay, what else can I show you? The line tools that I was talking about experimenting with are right here. Under tools, I can create a photo box if I want to. If I clicked this, I could come down here, drag and drop. I could put a photo over the top of this photo. I don't do that a whole lot. That feels kind of album-y to me. Like if I was making a wedding album, maybe I would do that. But if I'm making a LayFlat portfolio from VanLife, I'm going to skip that. I'm going to keep things pretty simple. I can also do a text box. If I clicked on this, I could come down here and drag and drop, create a text box, and put copy over this image. That is something I would do in a VanLife LayFlat book. If I had more time, I would have gone back to my journal, and I would have taken journal entries from the exact day that I made this picture, and I would put them over the top. I'd probably reverse it out in white. I'd keep the copy blocks very small. I'd keep the typeface and the font size small. Nice, clean, concise use of copy. I would think about doing that. But here is where I used, on the cover when I showed you the lines, that's what I used right here. So on the first page of the book, if I go back here and I go to this page, I used the triangle shape. I never in my life thought I would use these at all. I thought these were cheesy. I was like, I'll never use a shape. This is for people making albums of like their dog. And it's true. Maybe people who have dogs want these shapes. I don't know. But I quickly found a use for it, especially when you realize that you can put images inside, you can put copy inside, and then you can run them and layer them over the top of other things. I use it all the time. I mentioned this before, the preview button. The preview just allows you to see clean spreads quickly. And I do like this. I use it all the time, constantly going back and forth. I can also export out a PDF proof of this entire document if I want to. I haven't done that in a long time, but if I wanted to email this to a friend just for fun, or maybe to the guys at Wayfair up in Colorado, they're the folks who built out the inside of my van, or if I was sending to someone at Dodge or whoever, I could do the PDF from there. The last thing I want to show you is a button I use constantly, which to me is one of the really important aspects of this software. What this allows me to do is this Manage Pages button right here. Manage Pages is a dream because what it allows me to do is see my entire document in layouts from beginning to end. This is invaluable. This is what I do with prints when I'm laying out a book. Typically, if I was doing a project, I would print all these spreads in little tiny prints. I would lay them out on a table in my living room, and I would sequence these. I've been doing this for years. A lot of the bookmakers, people that I know that make a lot of books, do this all the time. Now I can do it inside of the software like this. And the great part is, if I need to drag a spread or change the sequence, I just drag it over. I use this all the time. This is one of the most invaluable bookmaking tools in a button that I've ever seen. In Albania last year, when I showed this to the other photographer whose workshop I was taking, she said, "Oh my God, this is fantastic." And we would sit at night in the room, in our hotel room in Albania, and we would look at what I had done during the day and drag and drop those spreads into the sequence that I wanted. Now, I've completely messed up my sequence because I've done this test and sample so many times now. I don't even remember what the sequence is. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to show you how I use this software to make this book. The entire book, this probably took me an hour to do this book. Again, this is as basic a layout as you can possibly get. There is not a whole lot of complexity here. If I was trying to tell a story, I would have to do a lot more design work. But I'm not. I'm just saying, look, I'm testing this. Like, here's a dead raven upside down in a tree. It's put right through the center of the gutter. I would not do that in a non-LayFlat book, but I can now because you can see this entire thing. That, and I get a little tricky here with a spread like this. Wow. High-tech design. Take it in. Crying is normal. And that's it. So I just wanted to show you how I used this software to put the book together. Again, big, bold spreads and big, bold typography is really all I was after. How many pages is this thing? I think we're talking about 110 pages, maybe. I think 110 is the page limit on these. And I even threw a page in the back here. These are all my actual physical paper journals with Fujiroids that I make. Every time we overnight in the van, I take Fujiroids and then I write in the date and the location just as a catalog for myself to remember where we were. And that's it. So if you don't have a van, I encourage you to get one. If you don't explore, I encourage you to explore. And if you haven't used this software, I encourage you to use this software because it's very easy. It's very intuitive. It's not as complex as some of the other options. And if you're new to bookmaking and you want to make something like this, then I think it's the perfect choice. Well, I am back after that dazzling software display. I know that you're all rushing out right now to download Bookwrite and make your own VanLife LayFlat. Even if you drive a 1984 Pontiac Fiero with a blower installed on it, you are going to make a Fiero book, I hope. So let's talk about how I would use this, because I know there's more than a few people out there saying, why on earth would I ever spend $300 or $400 on a book like this? Now, when I hear people ask that question, the vast majority of the time, they are amateur photographers or travelers or painters or writers or whatever. And as I've said many times before, I think that there's more of a benefit today in being an amateur or a consumer prosumer than there are with being a pro. I think it's a more fun lifestyle. I think it's a better way to enjoy your photography than it is to try to make a living with it anymore. That's just my personal opinion. But were I still making a living, I will shine a little light here on what it was like for me back when I was a photographer and how I would spend my money in terms of promotion. And I was constantly making portfolios back in the day. A portfolio back in the day would cost well over $300 or $400 to make. Not always, but most of the time when you had your big official portfolio book, it cost a fortune to print. Number one, the paper that you were using and the printing that you were using was very expensive. The containers, I had 2 oversized metal cases, and then inside the metal case was a metal covered front and back portfolio case with pages where I would do these really beautiful art prints and put them in. These were really expensive, and you had to obviously ship and receive those. Clients got a little wonky about that over the years, shipping these things. I had wooden cases made by hand that held portfolios. This might sound excessive, but it's not, because that was how I was getting my primary business, was through these portfolios. The last job I turned down as a photographer because I was too sick to do it. It wasn't, part of me didn't even want to do the job because at that point mentally I'd moved on as a photographer, but from being a photographer, it was a $40,000 creative fee for the day to do the shoot. And I said no because I was too, like I said, too sick to do it. I didn't think I could work or perform for 10 hours straight. I had Lyme disease and I was sort of in the acute stages of it, and I just said, I can't do this, much to the chagrin of my wife, who was like, suck it up, dude. But $40,000, a creative fee, you know, that, I don't want to say that was typical, but it was not really outside the bounds. I had, earlier in that same year, I'd turned down a $50,000 single day fee, creative fee, for a shoot for a vineyard. Oddly enough, that may sound like a lot of money. It was a terrible financial deal. that they had come to me and said, we want you to do this shoot. They're very flattering. This is the art buyer from the agency that comes to me, not the vineyard, the go-between. We love your work. We've seen your work. We love you want to do this. It's a $50,000 creative fee. And you're like, you know, the unskilled, unfamiliar photographer says, wow, that's a lot of money. But then when you get into the production side of things, you realize that they didn't budget enough for production, which would have put me in a tight spot, which would have meant I would have had to dip into that creative fee to cover my own bases, and it would have been a horrible situation. My point is, yes, there is a point buried in here somewhere. My point is that spending $300 or $400 to land that client is nothing. So the number one use of the book like this for me was commercial, editorial, or advertising portfolio. If you are billing creative fees of $5,000 to $15,000 a day for a commercial shoot or an advertising shoot, then $350, $400, $500 for a portfolio is nothing. And here's the cool part about making a portfolio like this. Back in the day, I couldn't really tailor each portfolio to a specific client. I had to just make a general portfolio and hope that they saw something in there that worked. I can actually, with this, with print on demand, I could make this for a specific person inside of an agency or a client, one particular person who's the person that's actually going to do the assignment or the assigning or choose the photographer. I can build it for them. The specificity of being able to make a POD portfolio is way beyond what I had before. The second thing, and don't tell anyone, but the dark years of my life I spent as a wedding photographer. And I also shot a lot of portraits. The portraits were great, and I'm just joking about the wedding stuff. But at the time, I had to sort of hide it because it was so frowned upon to come from my side of photography, which was the reportage documentary side, and do weddings. I took a lot of abuse from people for doing that. And so, but the money in the wedding industry was undeniable. And I actually had a really good time for the first few years doing it. I met a lot of cool people. I went to great locations. Same thing. The portfolios that I made for weddings, if I could have had this at my disposal and had the specificity of making a book for a specific location or client, $350, $400 is nothing. The last wedding I did was 20 grand for the fee, and I mentioned earlier, I turned down a 40,000. The 40,000 job I turned down was another wedding. And that, you know, again, $400 to book a 40 grand shoot is kind of money well spent. Number three, I would also use a book like this for access. As a documentary photographer, it's gotten harder and harder and harder to gain access into places that I used to be able to just waltz right in. There's a lot of suspicion today. Social media has really done a number and burned a lot of us because people in the field assume that everything you're doing is going on social and that you're trying to get famous and make money off of them, and it can make things very difficult. And so this is a way of cutting through the noise. I've mentioned many times on this channel that I carry field books, field guides with me, which are smaller, less expensive, very informal printed material that that when people in the field say, what are you doing here? I just hand them these things and say, look, this is what I'm doing. And it really shows that you're not an Instagrammer. It shows you're not a looky-loo and a tourist. This would be for the big guns. Let's say that I needed access from a government organization. Let's say I wanted to work on the border. I'm in a very sensitive area. I get a name of someone who's the media liaison or the PIO or somebody, and I say, look, I need to make an impression. I need to get in there. Then I would think about using something like this. Two people, by the way, have already reached out to buy this, and I said no. And someone reached out to get prints that were in here, and I said no. But that's a whole nother story. Point number four is a brand tease. If I was going after a brand, so many people go after brands with their Instagram account, and frankly, it's lame. Because, and here's why, you may love Instagram, you may hate it. The amount of time that you get with a client when you send them a link to Instagram is about 15 seconds because they're immediately distracted. They've looked at tens of thousands of Instagram accounts. The vast majority of them, regardless of who's putting whose name is on it, it all looks the same. It's that Instagram content. It's content, not photography. It's work that crosses your eyes and never connects with your brain. Photography is the stuff that crosses your eyes and gets seared into your brain and you cannot forget it. That's what you put in a book like this. This makes a huge difference. I've gone into business meetings where the people who were pitching us on something had made books specifically for each of the people in the room. So I got a book that when I opened it had my name in it. And that made an incredible lasting impression on me. I still remember the person who did that. I remember their company. I follow them online. They're not on social, but the guy has a legitimate online presence. And I am completely impressed by this person. If someone said to me, here's my IG feed, I wouldn't even look. I would just blow it off. So if I was going after Dodge, for example, which is the brand of vehicle I drive, if I was going after Dodge and I said to an art buyer or an ad agency exec, and I said, here's my Instagram feed, or I said, by the way, what's your mailing address? And I dropped one of these in and then said, here's my site, here's my social, whatever, but I hit them with this first. Huge difference. Number 5 use of this would be a personal project that I really felt I wanted to cement. Okay, I haven't done one of these in years. The only thing that I can think of that I've done recently that I can see doing a book like this for is my Albania project from last year, where I went to take a workshop. This year, 2020, I was supposed to go back and co-teach that same workshop. It got canceled, obviously, because of COVID. Now it's on for September of 2021. We're either gonna do 2 trips or 1 trip to Albania, 2 trips with a gap in the middle, or 1 trip. We're actually having a call about that today. That project is interesting to me because it's totally unlike anything I've done. I'm not saying it's great, I'm just saying it's different, and I like it, and I think about it from time to time. So come September, when I come back and I edit that and I have 2 years worth of work, I would think about doing something like this just for personal reasons, just to have and sort of encapsulate what I did and have fun with it and try some weird designs, and I would make one. And the last thing that I could think about using this for is if I was part of a group. I'm not a joiner, really, but if I was, let's say that there was a Fuji X-T4 Club of America, and it was a bunch of total geeks who sat around and put red soft releases on their X-T4s and little wooden grips and never used the cameras, but just sat around talking. Just play along, just go along with me. I know you know someone in this crowd. But let's say that I was a part of that group. Imagine saying, let's as a group hire a designer, which is gonna cost you probably somewhere between $3,500 and $5,500. Let's as a group pool our money, hire a designer, and make a book like this. Or you could, maybe there's someone in the group that has design chops and you save that money and you say, we're gonna pool our resources and we're gonna spend money to buy these books. Then you each have a collective, and that's not really a story book, that's more of a portfolio book from the X-T4 group saying, these are the best images of the year, this is an X-T4 annual, this is a picture of my soft release, this is a picture of my little wooden handle, this is a picture of the right strap and the right bag and the right shoes and the clothes that I have on and all of that stuff that makes all the difference when it comes to making great pictures, and you make a book like that. So that's why I made it, that's how I made it, and that's how I would use it. I hope that this was kind of helpful, partially helpful. He's only mostly helpful. Hopefully you know that movie reference. So anyway, today I went with the Sony ZV-1, and this thing is tiny. I keep this camera on me all the time. It's in my little Cotopaxi day pack that I carry all the time that has a little camera insert in the bottom. It looks like a regular backpack. I keep an X-T2 with my 50, and I keep the Sony in there all the time for a motion cam. And I have a little Fujiroid, and I have my phone, and I have my journal, and I have an AG23, and I have some fountain pens, some gum, my AirPods, which don't work anymore, but I still carry them around because it's Apple and they're seared into my heart like no other brand. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. I will be back with another film, I swear, at some point.